that metropolitan conglomerate of Kingston, Spanish Town, Portmore.
Right.
So it's a natural growth area. What the government is seeking to achieve in this project area is an integrated development. An integrated development consisting primarily of agricultural enterprises, but also of housing communities of different types and their commercial space, as well as some urban space. The overall object is for us not to create another dormitory community like Portmore, but to create a community where a person work and live nearby.
Wonderful. So having considered all of these elements, then we have consulted with all the stakeholders, one of whom would have been those in the agricultural sector, because you do have persons who have farmlands in the area. Am I correct?
Absolutely. The master plan was developed over about 3 areas. It was a project spearheaded by the National Environment and Planning Agency, and it was drafted by a planner with a civil engineer after consultation with all of the relevant agencies and interest groups.
All right, so let me get down to a little bit of nitty-gritty as well. Mr. Fulton is here from the Jamaica Agricultural Society. Certainly in the lead up to the finalization of the master plan, there were persons who had some concerns in terms of what would happen with farmers out there. Are you comfortable, given the plan that has been announced by government, where everything is at?
I'm not comfortable with the revised plan.
You are?
Yes.
Very comfortable.
Yes, not with the first plan. I have written to the minister on the first plan, and I've asked him to change the plan to include all the farmers that are on the land. What we couldn't guarantee that all farmers will be exactly where they were before the revised plan. But there should be no plan that would exclude the farmers. And I'm quite comfortable that I've seen a plan that includes all of them. My job in all of this is to see that the farmers continue to produce. And it was too long to have farmers, nearly 300 of them, not knowing tomorrow if they will be on the land, not knowing if they could consider permanent crops like coconut or jackfruit or soursop or anything, because they don't know the tenure. So once that lease is agreed, then they can now plan around that and know that they can have a family in and around the Old Harbor, St. Catherine, Spanish Town, where they have easy access to the land.
Fantastic.
So that is my plan. That is my role, to ensure that farmers remain there. And I'm grateful for the new development to see that they will live a better standard of living. They will have potable water. They will have better roads. They will have sewage. They will have systems like schools. And I also requested of the minister to ensure that somewhere in the plan down the road that you have a state-of-the-art hospital and a new university to take care of the educational needs of the farmers' children. And if we get that, we'll be okay.
Before I get to Mr. Clark, Mr. Shakir, you know, Mr. Fulton spoke about the preliminary plan that was announced or shared, really, and the final master plan that took into account all the elements that stakeholders would have presented to government. A key component of that, as Mr. Fulton was alluding to, was the expansion of the agricultural areas in the Bernard Lodge area. Give us a little bit more on
In
that.
response to public criticism of the limited space available for agriculture, the Prime Minister ordered a review of the master plan. And out of that review came the addition of 1,330 acres of prime agricultural land into the master plan area. So now agriculture comprises 56%.
56%, the majority, really.
By far the largest chunk and the majority of the area of the master plan. some farmers have to be relocated. Those who have leases or who farm within the limited area designated for housing, commercial, urban development have to be relocated. And they have been relocated within existing Bernard Lodge, as well as this additional piece.
Viewers, we want to ensure that you too are part of the discussion. Please feel free to send us your comments and questions as well for us to pose to members of our panel. Already we have Jennifer from Facebook making a comment. We're happy that this topic is being discussed. It's very important, and happy that it's finally being settled on a decent decision. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. Let's get Peter Clark into it from the Water Resources Authority. You're now here the second time on OPM Connect. Welcome again, Peter, because you really are, shall I dare say, the authority really when it comes to looking at the environmental concerns, particularly with water. The WRA has certainly been looking at the Bernard Lodge area, and in particular some concerns that have had to do with the aquifer and ensuring that the water table is not disturbed. Tell us about what the findings are.
Well, the Water Resources Authority, when we were consulted with regards to the development for the Bernard Lodge development area, had two primary concerns. One clearly would have been, where would water come from to provide potable and commercial needs?
Yes.
And the second one would have been the aquifer. We were quite positive that the aquifer itself could not sustain the enterprises that would have been introduced. So the enterprise team has been advised, and they have looked outside of the area for to provide the water needs. So the water needs are being provided from outside of the area. So in no way would the existing aquifer be stressed with regards to trying to provide the water needs. The second concern would have been the condition of the aquifer itself,
right,
and maintaining it as a viable aquifer. Now, the first thing that we must know is that the aquifer over the last few decades, or scores of decades, was being recharged in what we would call a unsustainable, I don't want to say artificial, but in an unsustainable way, because it was being recharged by virtue of the agricultural practice that was happening there. It was being the prime agricultural product was sugar. Sugar cane was being planted, and in irrigating sugar, what we do is flood irrigation. So what was actually recharging the aquifer in the main was the excess water from the irrigation process. With the transition from sugar cane, what it means is that whole aquifer recharging process was now radically limited.
Yes.
It was now only dependent on direct rainfall on the aquifer. So that in itself is not sustainable. So what has to be introduced is measures to recharge the aquifer. So in speaking with the architects and the planner, well, not the architect, but speaking with the planner, and in speaking with the enterprise team and the engineers, the civil engineers, as Mr. Shakir has hinted to, we directed that what should happen is that measures must be put in place to recharge the aquifer. So a part of the overall structure of what will happen in terms of development will be what we call recharge zones. These will be driven by detention ponds and retention ponds. Large ponds, we see them in parts of South Florida, and they call them lakes. So the idea is that in engineering structures within the development, we can actually put something in place that will actually help to protect the aquifer. Because if we leave it as it stands, then it is just being more slowly, but definitely depleted.
Yes.
As a result, not just with regard to the engineered structures, there are very strict stipulations that the WRA has required of the planners that will have to be put in place. I won't give you the nitty-gritty details, but the broad headings are that there must be waste management plans, because improper waste, solid waste disposal can be can be contaminating. There must be sewage. There must be a proper sewage disposal plan. So, as a matter of fact, what we actually insist on is that the sewage is going to be off-site treatment, not within the area. There must be a stormwater plan,
yes.
because it is this stormwater, when we put in developments, that channels some of the rainwater away, and we need to retain it. So in the overall structure, there will be designs that will retain as much as possible the stormwater. We insist on that, so that the stormwater will be available for recharge of the aquifer.
So I think that the fears of those who would have initially, been, voiced in the earlier years, in 2018 thereabouts, certainly all those have been answered in terms of.
Well, we've addressed, yes. We've addressed them as in a scientific manner.
Fantastic. I have a couple of questions from Dion on Facebook. The person is asking, how does the government and stakeholders plan to integrate the existing farmers into the development? That's one. Will there be crops sold to developers, or will there still be need to source buyers for these crops? And it's a nice way to segue into the light industries that certainly will be in the Bernard Lodge area. So let's take them one by one. We'll start with Mr. Shakir.
So, one of the main problems that our small farmers have had over the years is a guaranteed market.
Yes.
That's a problem on both sides, because you may have a market, but our farmers have not always produced at the levels that had been agreed with the market.
Yes.
Well, Cost Club Limited, the owner of Megamart, has announced, and it's public knowledge, a large agro-processing facility at Lakespen.
Yes.
It will have a farmer's market. It will purchase the crops grown by farmers in the master plan area. It will give quotas to the farmers, e.g., you grow 1,000 pounds of tomato and I'll buy it every fortnight for you at X price. So you will have a guaranteed market at a known price.
Sorry, Mr. Fulton, you said that the area is primarily at this point now sugarcane lands.
Yes.
But what are there are small farmers on the lands. What are they growing? What kind of crops are they growing?
They grow a whole host of vegetable crops. Callaloo, pop choy, okra, cucumber, pepper is a big crop there, pumpkin,
yes.
And some of them tomatoes, and some of them have the intention to grow permanent crops, such like coconuts and ackee and so on. And they have been doing that for a long time, but what we need is a more concentrated production, so that you don't have to drive a whole day to get a volume of anything to process. And I hope this development will do that. But apart from that, my instruction from my board and my farmers is that we should now draw the line at Bernard Lodge. We have 27% of our country in prime agricultural land. That has slipped to 20%. So we now have this development, which seems something that comes along because of the pressure we face in Spanish Town and Kingston, not possible all Harbour. But we should now say, listen, let us now use the rest of our Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 land to develop the type of agricultural systems which you find in Canada, in Holland, in the United States, that can feed our people and let us less food insecure, or let us more food secure.
Absolutely.
And
the
therefore,
positive is better. Let's get more security.
I support this plan,
Yes.
with its integration,
Yes.
but let us draw the line here now.
You're going beyond the plan.
Yes, and say no more of these lands should be used in housing
The
and
great
industrial
thing
development.
about it is that this really is the blueprint that can be taken and used across the board. So let's see exactly what government will do. But Mr. Shakir, back to you in terms of the farmers and their market now. So will there be need, based on where you see the projections going, for persons outside to come in and be able to also offer a market for the agricultural produce?
Sure. Can I finish where I had begun? There is a second facility that will be constructed nearby at Innswood, an enterprise called Model Agricultural Farms Limited, or Farming Limited. It too will provide a guaranteed market for the farmers in Bernard Lodge, Kingston, and the entire environs. So it's not only farmers there. So having supplied the market is one thing.
Yes.
How do we maintain the production? To supply the market is the other challenge we
Very
have.
good follow on, yes.
So it is those same agro enterprises, Lakespen and Kingswood, that will train the farmers. They will supply new cuttings, new seedlings, because part of our problem is that we are using the same old rootstock over and over and over again. So the production decreases.
Yes.
So there are some Israeli experts on farming in Kingswood who have guaranteed that they will provide not only new cuttings, seedlings, etc., but will show our farmers how to produce on an intensive scale, as they do in Israel, in a scientific manner.
In a structured manner.
Absolutely,
as well.
so that they can meet their quotas.
You know, I have several questions and comments coming in from Facebook. Let's just take a few. By the way, this your response a while ago helps with Rowan's question, which was about, will the farmers be trained, especially in new technologies? Joe, you just answered that. Let's get to Al Reed from Facebook, who's asking, with so many farmers in Jamaica, and they are now producing at, I beg your pardon, let me try this again. With so many farmers in Jamaica, and they are not producing in a large mass, why not incorporate all the farmers in the farmers market?
The farmers market, as I understand it, the farmers markets will be open to all farmers, not just to Bernard Lodge farmers.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get back to a few of the questions that was asked earlier by Dion. Will the crops be sold to developers? I think we addressed that. Is the government looking at other areas to develop this plan, especially in Trelawney?
All right, that's another good question.
Yes.
Because SCJ Holdings Limited, please, and I have to stop you. People like to call the company Sugar Company of Jamaica
It's
Limited.
SCJ.
It's not.
They've
There is
thrown off
another
the acronym.
company
Yes.
that is called Sugar Company of Jamaica Limited.
Yes.
SCJ, its proper name is SCJ Holdings Limited. It is really an agricultural land management company.
Yes.
And really holds in trust all of the government's sugar lands and former sugar lands. Among its holdings is a large property in Trelawney by the name of Long Pond. We have begun encouraging new enterprises into Long Pond. As we speak, there is presently a large farmer about to reap his first crop of hemp, which will be converted into CBD and exported. Now, I know that those farmers will buy under supervised conditions hemp produced by smaller farmers. Of the Long Pond lands, which are about 14,000 acres, 3,000 government has recently entered into an agreement with the All Island Cane Farmers Association to provide 3,000 acres of lands to small farmers who used to grow cane to supply the sugar factories in Trelawney that have now closed, which is Hamden and Long Pond.
Yes.
So we're going to have in that 3,000 acres, perhaps 100, 150 former sugar growers who must diversify. They can't grow cane in there. And plans are afoot to provide them with a guaranteed market as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, so Bernard Lodge is the prototype, and depending on its success or otherwise, although I have no doubt that it will be immensely successful, we will move to Trelawney.
Fantastic. And in the Trelawney possible plan, of course, we'll integrate the WRA as well.
Oh, absolutely. The problem in Trelawney, though, is the reverse, is the converse of Bernard Lodge.
Yes.
It doesn't have enough water. which is another issue that has to be dealt with.
Indeed. All right, let me get back to some more questions on social media as I see it. How would the initiative affect the level of imports into the island? I think this is a wider agricultural question. Maybe the Minister of Agriculture will have to have him on at another time, but certainly Mr. Fulton could weigh in, because certainly this will be an uptick in terms of local production in the first instance, and then we look to exports and value-added agro-processing.
Well, we have a big import bill of about $1 billion. Half of that is at this point unavoidable. Things like chicken, animal feed, corn, some of our starch, a large amount of our starch through cornmeal, flour, and rice. Now we can impact those over time. There are also foods in the import bill that, because of our low per capita income of just about 5,000, our people do not afford a lot of things, and that's a fact. And so there are import bills there for chicken necks and backs and so on, because and salt fish and salt mackerel and
but we're
pig's
talking
tail.
about the agro.
Right, so we won't be able to impact that right away.
That's correct.
But in terms of vegetables, in terms of when we go low, we import cabbage and we import carrots and onion. That is what we are attacking now.
Correct.
And I have good hopes with the plans that the ministry have, that in about 5 years, we will see us conquering that and producing those and cut that
so
food
we'll fill the
import
local
bill.
market and look to export.
Exactly.
And in filling the local market, would that necessarily equal a reduction in prices for consumers as well?
Yes, you will get...
It should.
It
All
should.
things considered.
All things considered. Right.
Indeed.
It should. But what is happening here, 1 minute, is a greater land reform. The land reform in this country began 150 years ago with land settlement. In 40 years ago, 50 years ago, we pick up with land lease, phase 1, phase 2.
Yes.
And then in 10, 15, 20 years ago, we pick up with agropark. They've all been disunited hodgepodge. What I'm looking for this now is a more organized land reform to put our people on the land.
I think this master plan has the
And this master plan
great
is
elements
a part
that
of
would
that
do
reform,
Yes.
which we hope will be transcended to other large parcels of land. And to say to people, you have to wait for the development. You can't see government land and just feel you can go on it, because plans are being made for these lands. And so just make the application to the Commissioner of Land or through SCJ in an orderly way, so that we do not have this organized, this very bad way of looking at development, and we will get there. It takes some time, but we will get there.
I'm happy you made the call and the appeal, because traditionally and culturally, really, the issue of squatting, whether it be for residential purposes or farming purposes, has been a major issue in this country.
We have to stop
and
it.
certainly it has to be, I mean, to develop, for Jamaica to develop in a few years' time, you can't have just unplanned settlements and that kind of a thing. So it really is a good start. Mr. Clark, I see you wanting to come in.
As a matter of fact, when you speak of the squatting, that was one of the issues that we had a problem with.
Yes.
As things stand now, there are, I don't want to say squatters, there are communities there that are irregular.
Yes.
And these communities have been posing a problem. There are activities that have been taking place in the area that have been posing a problem for the aquifer. There's illegal sand mining. So between illegal sand mining and the irregular communities, it has been degenerative, what has been happening there. One of our stipulations as well is that all of the irregular communities and irregular persons that are residing within the master plan area should be
become
regularized. They must be brought, if there's a sewage system, they must be brought into the sewage system. They must be brought into all of the management systems, because you can't leave pockets of irregularity.
Yes.
So having done that, there are other stipulations. There are existing wells there that are being used by for instance, the National Water Commission and by other entities, National Irrigation Commission themselves, and we have to protect those as well. So we have stipulated buffer zones around all existing wells in two metrics. One at about, let us say, 100 meters out as a buffer zone with nothing happening, and then within 25 meters of the wells, fencing, And consideration is given even to whether pesticides can be used in the area or not,
Or should be.
or should be used, and who should be
Wonderful.
allowed to use,
Yes.
all of that. So we've tried as best as possible to put in all the measures that can give protection to what we have there in terms of
That's
aquifer.
brilliant. So let's now go a little bit to the town hall meetings that you've been having. Certainly, having ratified the master plan, cabinet said to yourself, SCJ, well, let's now go
Share
and
it.
re-engage so that we can share, have persons understand what the thinking is. How has it been going?
Well, we have just started to roll out a public education program,
Yes.
as you might be aware. We had our
So
first...
just not to interpret, there are two elements. Certainly, you would have engaged the persons ahead of the
Before.
ratification
Well-
of the master plan. Cabinet would have taken into consideration, approved that master plan, and now with that approved master plan, you're going back again
to share
the
the final master plan.
Absolutely.
And how do we go forward.
Indeed. So
We've-
tell us about
We've
that.
had the first meeting with the communities, the informal communities of within the master plan area
Yes.
of Dunby Holding, Phoenix Park, Barbara's Village, and another community near Salt Pond. And we had a full house. I mean, I say a full house. We could have had 200-300 people. And the reception was amazing.
Yes.
People were happy to hear of the master plan, wanted to participate, wanted to know, how will I benefit? Can I get a job as a mason?
Fantastic.
It was really encouraging.
Fantastic. I see frantic signs that we are out of time.
Time.
I cannot believe it. Half an hour has
Yes.
certainly flown by very, very fast. Let me start with you then, Mr. Fulton. At the end of the process, you said you are fully on board. Your ideas and the plan certainly of farmers has been taken on board. And so what is your final vision at the end of the day when we look
To
to the...
see more innovative farmers who will quadruple their production by using technology, get their family a higher standard of living, educate their children, that you will not identify a farmer as how he looks. You will not know us different from engineers and doctors and teachers, because our standard of living will be higher at the end of the day
Thank you
from
so
better
much.
production. That's
Thank
what
you.
I'm looking for.
Indeed. And Mr. Clark?
Well, the incorporation of structures, engineered structures, hydrologic structures, into a development of this magnitude is quite welcome, because it will set a pattern for how I would like to see the, developments proceed into the future. We have to always consider that we can't only take, but we have to also put back. And I think in the main, that has been neglected to some extent. And the fact that we can now accept that there's a shortfall, and that we must also not only take water, but put back water, I think it's very welcome for me.
Fantastic, and certainly the master plan incorporates all of those. A good blueprint to move forward to in the future. And now, finally, Joe.
All right, finally. I don't want anybody to think that this Bernard Lodge project will be finished in 2 years. The first element of the project is to implement the infrastructure, what I call the shared infrastructure.
Yes.
That all of the developments within the master plan area will be serviced by. I think if we could see rollout, for example, water, sewage. Peter has told you, all sewage systems within the master plan area will be shut down, and the sewage will be taken off-site for treatment
Yes.
and storage. Water will come from outside of the alluvial aquifer. The challenge now, the immediate challenge, is to get this infrastructure in place within the shortest possible time so that the full development can be implemented.
What are your timelines?
I would say 18 months, full infrastructure in place. Some developers will start building houses before then, because some border on the I-95 and they have access to some infrastructure. So they will start later this year. But the build out of this entire project, 14,000 houses,
Yes.
don't forget, and 300 farms, will take, I am guessing, 3 to 5 years.
All right, a good 5-year plan. Thank you so much, Joseph Shakir, Managing Director of SCJ Holdings, for joining us today, along with Mr. Peter Clark, Managing Director of the WRA, and Mr. Lenworth Fulton, the President of the Jamaica Agricultural Society. Very important discussion that we should have, certainly as we look toward structured and modern development in Jamaica. Thank you so much, viewers, for joining us today. Join us again next time for another interesting discussion on OPM Connect.